Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, the Bay Area's premier author interview program. Welcome today, the author of The Time Traveler's Wife. And you can all say, we know who that is. That's Audrey Niffenegger. Welcome.
Thank you.
We're not going to talk about that book too much. We're going to talk about your latest book called Her Fearful Symmetry, published also by Scribner's. Welcome aboard. It's nice to have you.
Thank you.
You know, it's 6 years ago, they tell me in your press material, that you gifted us with The Time Traveler's Wife. 3 million copies have been sold in the U.S. alone.
So they tell me.
Looks like you didn't miss nobody.
Yeah. Well, when you think about all the copies that get shared, that's really a lot of people.
That's a lot of folks. Yeah, it really is. And with having that kind of success, I was going to say sales record, but let's call it success. That sounds a little more literary. Having that kind of success, as you approach doing a second book, a second novel, do you have more or less trepidation than you might have had if it sold a lot less?
I think the main problem is to forget what's going on out in the world, what people want, what people have said to you, and just be very quiet in your room and play and come up with something that is entertaining to yourself before you can convince anyone else to be entertained by it.
Yeah, and you said in another interview something that you feel good about, that you believe is true, and maybe other people will find it that way.
Yeah, well, in a certain way, when you write and then publish a book, what you're asking of the reader is that we're all going to play together now, and if you can get people to engage with you like that, then we can all have that experience.
Yeah. You know, to me, one of your main characters is one of London's famous Victorian cemeteries, Highgate. And I think the way you bring that into the story is just marvelous. How did you? And you're very involved with Highgate. You're a volunteer.
I am a volunteer. Before I began to write this novel, I originally thought I might set it in Chicago, and then decided very early on that I had to have this Highgate Cemetery. It was the most beautiful cemetery I'd ever seen. So I called them, and they rather reluctantly agreed to let me come over and talk to them in person. And there was this back and forth process of them trying to decide if I was okay, and me trying to get myself integrated and involved. And eventually I hung around there so much that they said, okay, well, make yourself useful. You can give some tours. And I did, and it's just thrilling. It's so much fun to walk people around and watch them see it for the first time. Just fantastic.
Now, this is a cemetery, a kind of cemetery. This is one of the great examples that, you don't see around here too much. It's got great statuary. It's got lots of mausoleums, lots of grass, and it expresses the Victorian thinking and the Victorian design, and I suppose also its attitude toward death and resurrection.
Yeah, and you can see the phases and the fashions of mortuary stuff.
Yeah.
When Highgate was founded, it was 1839, and all things Egyptian were very much in vogue, and so it has some fantastic pieces of enormous, almost stage-like architecture that were meant to attract people to want to be buried there.
And also to do the best for the deceased, I guess, to be proud.
Yeah, they wanted to create this park-like atmosphere so that people would want to come and picnic on Sunday and stroll about and just create this space outside of the city. It was on the border of the city to get people from being buried in these crowded, nasty churchyards.
Yeah, and at one time, people would go there and picnic.
Yeah, they loved to promenade, and it was a fashionable place to be.
I think I'm going to go.
Oh, you should
go see it.
Yeah.
How much does it cost to tour?
£7 these days.
£7, and then they have a pot at the end that you can put in an additional.
Yeah, we'll wave the little green box at you at the end. You can throw in all your change that you don't need.
Because you're not getting paid, because you're a volunteer.
We're all volunteers. The only people who get paid are the grave diggers and the cemetery managers, and you wouldn't want volunteer grave diggers. I mean,
No,
you need professionals.
No, absolutely, absolutely. There's no time traveling going on in her Fearful Symmetry, but there's a lot to do with twins.
There is a lot to do with twins. The twins were in the book before the ghost, before a lot of other stuff that came later. At the very beginning, what I had was a man stuck in his apartment. He's got agoraphobia. He's got obsessive-compulsive disorder. And there was this man and a girl who visits him. Mm-hmm. And characters tend to need other characters. It's very hard to have characters in isolation. They don't have anyone to talk to. And so this girl that was coming very early on ended up with a twin. And then I thought, ooh, twins, that's a great structural device. I can use that in every part of the book. And so it just began to get its tentacles all through everything.
They are all over the place, the whole notion. One of the with one set of twins, the young ones, who are the 20-year-olds, mm-hmm. Valentina and Julia, their relationship is clearly stated. Valentina wants to get out of being a twin in a way, and the other one doesn't.
Well, Julia has always been the dominant twin and has always had everything her own way, so naturally she enjoys that. Valentina's on the receiving end of it all and naturally would like a little bit more independence. And
she thinks it's time for a change.
Yes, she does. And neither of them are moderate personalities, and so it's all or nothing.
Her Fearful Symmetry has many more fascinating characters, and we'll meet up with some more of them when we return.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
Audrey Niffenegger is our guest. She's here to talk about her new novel, Her Fearful Symmetry, which is published by Scribner's and had a front page review in the New York Times Book Review, which is a nice way to launch, I think. I mean,
indeed,
if you would recommend that.
Yes, I found it auspicious.
The last paragraph here, I think, is worth quoting. Lovers of Niffenegger's past work should rejoice. This outing may not be as blindly romantic as The Time Traveler's Wife, but it is mature, complex, and convincing. A dreamy yet visceral tale of loves, both familial and erotic. A search for self the search for self in the midst of obsession with another. Her Fearful Symmetry is as atmospheric and beguiling as a walk through Highgate itself. Now, that's high praise.
Indeed.
I mean, yeah. So, congratulations.
Thank you.
One of the things that surprised me about the book, I suppose, is, you had this great first success, and you told us some of the reason why, but why a ghost story?
Well, there was no ghost in the book at all until I'd been working on it for about 2 years. The twins are American, and to some extent I'm borrowing a plot device from Henry James. It's about the young American ingenues who come over to the old country and get in trouble. Mm-hmm. And Highgate is a very wealthy neighborhood, and they weren't just going to move in there in a cold water flat. They needed a little help to have that flat.
No. They went to London in style.
And of course, how do you achieve this? Well, I decided to, whip out the big bag of cliches, and I gave them a dead relative who had inexplicably willed them this lovely estate and their beautiful flat.
Who was also
their aunt.
And twin.
And a twin, yes. She is the twin of their mother. So
you are beguiling.
Indeed. All the doubles have doubles. And so there they are in their lovely flat, and what they don't realize at first is that their aunt is stuck in the flat as a ghost. She is such a willful character that even though she's dead, she didn't want to die, and so she's ended up in this kind of limbo in her flat. And for quite a while, they blithely assume that all the weird little things that are happening are just, quirks of the apartment. And eventually she manages to make herself clear. But anyway, the ghost came in quite late, and it was partially because I had this plot device of the aunt, and as I thought about who the aunt might be, I created this character, and I was quite sad that I had killed her before I had any chance to use her.
She's killed within the first 6 pages, poor dear.
She's killed in the first sentence.
Yeah, that's true. If you read that carefully, she's dead.
Indeed. She dies before the first sentences even come to a period. And so the notion of a ghost thrilled me because suddenly I understood that, yes, what I'm actually doing here is writing a 21st century version of a 19th century ghost story.
And you can keep this wonderful character going. She does, among a lot of different things she does, the one that I kind of remember and like is that she, when not being involved with the other folks in the plot, she puts herself into a desk drawer.
Yes, that's her home.
That's really quite good of her to do that and not, rattle around on the ceiling or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's absolutely splendid.
She's very considerate at first.
Yes. And the 2 young twins have to live in her flat in order to qualify for her inheritance.
Indeed. She specifies that they have to live in it for a year before they can sell it.
You're a real plot master here, that.
Well, there's such an already existent bunch of interesting plot devices, and basically I was just picking and choosing.
Let's talk about one of my favorite secondary characters, Martin Wells and his wife. Now, Martin is an obsessive, compulsive, disordered person. And his talent, however, is doing crossword puzzles. I mean, creating crossword puzzles for British newspapers.
Yes, and British...
What a guy!
Yeah, British cryptic crosswords are quite something. I cannot do them. They are. I
can't either.
You have to be born there.
Yeah.
So it's a very amazing and intricate art form that I can only approximate understanding, but that is his skill.
Why did you give him such a deficit as a character?
Martin is one of the few characters I've ever created that is based on a real person. And I had a friend who had fairly severe OCD. He wasn't confined to his apartment or anything like that. But my friend had such wonderful insight into what was going on with this disease and was able to reflect and to understand and to tell me about it. And in hearing what he was going through and how he understood it, I thought, oh my God, this is the most amazing situation for a person to find themselves in, and I really wanted to write about it.
Oh, it's absolutely fascinating to have someone to be able to talk.
He's a brilliant person.
Oh my gosh!
But anyway, so that was actually the starting point for the whole book, was this idea of writing about this person who's being completely taken over by their compulsions and rituals.
That's amazing, absolutely amazing. There's a minor character that pleased me every time she dropped into the story, Jessica Bates. Jessica Bates is the chair of the Friends of Highgate Cemetery. Sounds like somebody you must have met.
Yeah, well, if you flip open to the dedication page, the book's dedicated to Jean Pateman, who occupies that position in real life. Until very recently, she was the chair and had been the chair for quite some time. And Jean was responsible for allowing me to be in the cemetery, to write about the cemetery. And she educated me about the cemetery. And eventually I said, well, Jean, I just can't imagine writing about this without you. You're so much a part of it that it's hard to imagine the cemetery without you. And so she quite readily consented to let me base a character on her, which if you think about it is such an act of trust.
It certainly is.
And so I would show her all the chapters as I wrote them that her character was in so that she could object if she wanted to. But she never put the brakes on. And, she was wonderful.
Well, we're going to talk some more about ghosts and about one more major character. That's what's on our agenda for our final segment. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
This is Conversations on the Coast. The book we're talking about today is Her Fearful Symmetry. It's written by Audrey Niffenegger, published by Scribner's. Book list said in part, cunning, enrapturing. Niffenegger tells a gorgeously rendered, utterly bewitching, and profoundly unnerving tale of the mysteries of selfhood and death, and the way love can be both a radiant and a malevolent force. That's pretty deep stuff, and it is. That last part is very true in this book. Love can be both a radiant and a malevolent force. That does happen. One of the things that we've been talking a lot about the characters, and your New York Times reviewer, Suzanne, what's her last name? Kuckel. She said this, and I just want to share this because I think she's very, very on target. Niffenegger's characters are selfish, messy, vulnerable, and sometimes crazed, all under the attractive veneer of artistic and contemplative impulses. Yeah, that's your character. You did that.
Yes, I did.
That's very, very fair. Now, one of the characters with this artistic veneer in spades, as far as I'm concerned, is Robert Fanshawe. Tell us about Robert, who, incidentally, I have sympathy for Robert. I once had to write a thesis, and I know what a burden that can be, that you and can't get it done and can't get it done, can't get it done.
Yeah. Robert is my surrogate in the book. He and I are both
been
trying.
there, done that.
Yeah, we're both trying desperately to finish our books.
Yeah.
Robert is he's a history PhD candidate who has taken Highgate Cemetery as his thesis topic.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, one of the characters asks him how he's going, and he says that he has 1,400 and I forget how many pages. And the other character brightly responds, "Oh, well, that's great. You just have to edit it." And he says, "No, I'm only up to World War I." And that pretty much describes Robert. He's unable to let go of a lot of different things.
Yes.
And just kind of the things he loves excessively and can't stop.
No, can't stop. He also kind of manages the flats there, takes care of people, and
to some extent. He's able to leave his apartment, so that means he's the one who gets to take out the garbage.
Goodness gracious. Now, I think we should talk a little bit about Elspeth, just in terms of, how crazy is she? Or crazed, I think. She's one of the crazed ones.
Yeah, crazy like a fox, though. She's very self-interested. Yeah, I think when Elspeth was alive, she was lovely and worthy of being loved, and a little manipulative, but not in a way that Robert, her lover, particularly objected to. But as Robert says at a certain point in the book, once she's a ghost, she's slowly losing some vital component of being a human being, which is empathy. And she gradually is less and less able to understand what other people might need or want.
So the focus becomes more and more on herself.
More and more on herself.
What she needs and what she wants. And that leads to a very tragic situation toward the end of the book.
Yeah. Well, I tried in my imitation 19th century novelist way to make sure that all the characters get the ending they deserve. And whether that's true or not, different people have weighed in with different feelings about that. But definitely in Elspeth's case, I think that does happen.
The one whose ending I guess is appropriate, but to me very sad, is that Robert does finish.
Oh, he finishes his book.
He finishes his thesis, and then he's gone. He, leaves the stage, so to speak. At a time when you would think, well, now that he's done that, maybe he can get on with other things.
Maybe. I don't know.
Uh-oh. Is he coming back?
No, I don't write sequels.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad because this book is just great the way it is. And somewhere in one of the reviews, I saw that if you try to approach a Cockney accent when you say the title, Her Fearful Symmetry, that then you get a relationship to cemetery.
Well, it doesn't have to be a Cockney accent. When my explicitly non-Cockney editor, Dan Franklin, says it sounds like cemetery.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
All right.
A certain mushing of the vowels, I think, is all that's necessary.
You know, the people that come off a little badly, I think, is the other twin, the Chicago branch.
Edie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, they seem to be too well off in the suburbs of Chicago and probably insensitive, but we find out that's not quite true.
No, Edie gets less time on stage than a lot of the other characters, but as we find out more about her relationship with Elsbeth, her own twin, we can start to realize why Edie might be living the life she's living. So,
okay, well, if you want to know more about these relationships, if you want to know more about ghosts and what they do when they really get busy, you got to go out and get your copy of Her Fearful Symmetry. It's by Audrey Niffenegger. This has been Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at Jim Foster COC and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.